But he does Daf Yomi.
Okay, I think they didn't even know that parents knew, because last summer he learned with them in Portugal.
Yeah.
Okay, must be a good luggage here.
Thank you.
That's why.
Okay. We are on Ayin Tes, 79, Mishnah. Haisa oimedes al Rosh Hagag. She's on the roof, and L'chura, he's on the bottom, the husband, who's Zraka law, and he folds to get up into a paper airplane and throws it up to her on the roof, and it lands there. Here, the Kiddush of the Mishnah, Kivan shehigia la'avir hagag. It doesn't have to physically land. Once it crosses the airspace of the roof, hareza mugureshes. And the Gemara will analyze structurally what exactly we're talking about. Then it gives us the opposite din. Humil mala v'himil mata. He's on the roof and she's in the chotzer below. Uzrakolah, and he sends the get down. Here it doesn't have to land. Kivin shiyotzer meshus hagag. Once it leaves the airspace of the roof, nimchak or nisraf. If somehow on the way down, the ink gets erased, it burns up, or a bird catches it mid-flight, and we lose it. Hareza mugarashas, doesn't make a difference. The get was chal, once it's in the airspace, it reached her. That's what the Mishnah says. Freak the Gemara of Holominter. In either case, but let's certainly the first case. If he threw it up on the roof, well, the wind could, it's not nishmar. Mintar means it's protected. It's not nishmar, it could be blown off. And in order for it to, a chotzer to acquire again on behalf of the wife, it has to be a chotzer mishtameres. It has to be a chotzer that's protected, that they can't go just fly away. So in fact, it's a specific roof, a roof that has a makkeh. You know, we Jews, when we build our houses, we have to build a fence for safety purposes around our roof. So it was a chotzer mishtameres. The gag, we don't have to worry that it's going to blow off.
But a fence like that, it's just a railing, it's not a solid wall.
So let's assume it's a solid wall. Let's say that in the dinim of makkeh, it's a roof built around it's a wall built around the roof that's going to be shoymeret. In a charami, if it's flimsy, we could paskin that you could devise a scenario where it's kosher in terms of a makkeh, you fulfill maybe the mitzvah makkeh, but you didn't, but maybe it's not enough of a shimor that is considered a gaga mishtameres. Or I don't know enough about the dinim of a makkeh. Maybe for a makkeh to be a real halachic makkeh, it needs to be not flimsy. It can't just be a rail. It's got to be something that really can protect. And maybe they would two halachas would dovetail. It means it's a halachic makkeh, and therefore it's completely mishtameres. We don't have to worry about the getting. It's a good question. Ula bar Menashe Mishmei Avini Amar, different teretz. Here we're talking about with a roof. It's like a parapet that's within 3 tfachim of the gag. And I guess that was completely protected. And why would that work as the gag? Anything within 3 tfachim of a roof is considered like the roof. Where do we see this halacha? Sukkah, right? If lovewood, right? If your schach, if there's a separation between your wall and your schach, if it's less than 3 tfachim, it's considered if the schach is on your roof. We do this imaginary lifting of the side walls called lovewood, and they're doing the same thing.
But we do 10 on the bottom.
Say it again.
We do 10 on the bottom.
Now, on the bottom, it's Gidiyim Boikimbo. Here's a different standard. Where we don't want goats coming in from underneath. So we don't use the same. In some cases, yes. No, in some cases, if you have a wall going down, if it's not within the wall, we can draw the wall down also love with 3 tvachim. But there, if you have openings, sometimes you might have a bigger opening. So the Mishnah said, Hu milmala, if he's on the roof and she's on the bottom, she's also megureshes. But the chutzner on the bottom is also not a watched chutzner. It could blow away. So here we get a specific construct. Think about this. You have a 3-story house with a makeh on its roof. And then around that house is a chutzner. And around that chutzner is walls that are 6 stories tall. So the outer walls of the chutzner are much taller than that house. So therefore, that's why it's minter. The moment it's in the airspace outside of the makeh, it's protected because the walls on the outside of the chutzner are much higher. There's automatically, initially the Gemara might have been worried if he made it a paper airplane and he launches it above the makeh, so it's going to last in the chutzner, but maybe it's going to fly and not land in the chutzner. So we're talking about there are walls around that are much higher. So we know for certainly gravity, it's going to go. They understood it. The Metzias is going to fall into her chutzner. Rav Yishai says the same din. This halacha, and we say that as long as it hits the airspace of the chutzner, she's already megureshes. It doesn't have to land on the ground. Maybe it's only Kerebi, who said as well, when it comes to Shabbos, Sha'omar Kluta. What's Kluta? If you remember, in Shabbos, if you're standing in Rishus Harabi, and there's a Rishus HaYochid, and then after the Rishus HaYochid is another Rishus Harabi, and you throw a ball, and it travels. Now, normally you're chayiv on Shabbos when you transfer from Rishus Harabim to Rishus HaYochid. Usually, that means it's got to start from rest. You get it moving, and it has to rest. There has to be an akira and a ha'anocha. So, there was machlokas over there between Rebbe and the Chachamim. If you throw a ball from Rishus Harabim into Rishus HaYochid, and let's say after the Rishus HaYochid is another Rishus Harabim. So Rebbe holds your chayiv. He uses a principle called kluta. He as the ball is traversing the Rishus HaYochid, he imagines as if it's grabbed by the ground, and it's as if it's on the ground, even though it never rested there. The Chacham say you're not. It ended up landing the Rishus Harabim. You're not chayiv to bring a chatas because you transfer the ball from Rishus Harabim to another Rishus Harabim. Now, if you didn't move it Daled Amas Rishus Harabim, let's say you only moved one Am in Rishus Harabim and one Am in the other Rishus Harabim, you wouldn't be chayiv. But so according to the Rabbanan, you're not chayiv. According to the Rebbe, you're chayiv because of kluta. Now, here by Gittin, are we saying that this din, that the get only is acquired by the woman by the airspace, is that only according to the sheet of Rebbe, who holds of this principle called kluta? Or do we say no? Maybe the opinion there on Shabbos is different than the opinion in Gittin. Do we say kluta commission chadam or not? We could say here, by the case of Gid, even the Chachamim who don't hold of Kluta will hold that she's divorced. Ad kan lepli Rabban Aleh de Rabbi Elin Shabbos. Over there, the Chacham argue with Rabbi. That's by Shabbos. That they don't say that Kluta, that this imaginary, fictional, bringing it down. It's very abstract thought. It's like physics, it's traveling, but we say since instantaneously, at every moment, it's there, and you could drag it down. I mean, it's like a calculus thought. It's an abstract, or the Chacham don't buy into that. For them, for Shabbos, you need a physical akira. It has to come to complete rest. That's there. Aval hacha mishumin turu v'akaminter. Here, the principle is this get watched by the chotzer? Well, we described it because it's got these huge walls around it. It's watched, so they don't care about kluta. So they would say that it's a get as well. We're talking about where the walls of the outer chotzer were much higher than the ones in the inner. Is this only like Rabbi? Or says no, the Hakaminter, and here it's certainly watched. Then we said Nimchak, that if on the way down it got erased, she's already been divorced once it hit the airspace. Oh, it got erased on its way down. It's cleared the makeh and it's on its way down. Okay, because then once it hit the airspace of the chotzer, you're on the roof. The makeh is over here, and I launch it. And before it clears the makeh, it somehow got erased. Derech aliyah, as it's going up in its trajectory. Then lo, my time. When it's traveling up, it's not destined to come to rest. When it's coming down, it's destined to come to rest. But until the trajectory switches, she would not be divorced. Then it said nisraf. If it got burnt up on the way down, she's divorced. The get had to be an intact get before you launched it. And when you launch it, somehow a flaming arrow hits it, and now it's burning up. But when you launched it, it was not a fire.
Do I not have to check it to prove that?
These are going to be cases where probably there were Eidim, and Bezdin is going to interrogate the, what did you see? Oh, because it comes to Bezdin, the case comes in front of Bezdin, and they're going to adjudicate the case. So if there are no Eidim, so then it'll depend who makes the claim. Does the husband, oh no, she's divorced, I didn't divorce, who's Naman, then it just has to do with the believability of somebody, like in all cases, when the Gemara discusses any case, what is it? Is it a Metzias or was it done with Eidim? So let's say Eidim come and say, oh no, it was already on fire when it was in his hand before he threw it. Then Beskin will paskin she's not divorced. It was destined to be destroyed, so it's not a good get. He says a new principle, Rishuyos Chalukas begin. You have, let's say, a bias and a chotzer. Both are Rishus HaYachis. Or let's say a chotzer and a roof. They would be considered one chotzer, one Rishus. But for example, again, regarding Shabbos, they might be considered different ones. Regarding get, they're also not considered one rishus. They're considered separate rishuyos. We'll see how this makes a difference. Where did Rav Chisda get this? It's our Mishnah. Haiso Menesal Rosh Hagag, she was on the roof, and he's below on the chotzer. The Zarkulon, he threw it to her. Even she get Lavir Hagag, once it hits the airspace of the roof, Arezim Gureshes. Now, B'mai Askino. What is the actual case? Ilema Begag Dida, the chotzer Dida. If, let's say, it's her roof and her chotzer, the ball happens to come in and throw it to her. What do we care? Lamali Laviraga. Why do we have to wait until it's the airspace of the roof? Even if it stays in the chotzer, it belongs to her. She's going to be divorced even before it hits the airspace of the roof. Because the Gemara now is trying to say, who does these belong to? Well, if both belong to her, it doesn't have to hit the roof. Okay. Ella beget didei, v'chotzer didei. So maybe we're talking about the roof is his and the chotzer is his. So who cares? Who cares if it reached the airspace of the roof? It belongs to him. Why should she be misgarish with that? It never left his reshus. Ella pshita, begag dida, v'chotzer didei. It's her roof and his chotzer. Okay. So that explains the ratio. Where if he's on the bottom and it's his, and the roof is hers, then we say it was misgarish. But immediately the Mishnah gave us a second case. Hu milmala v'hi milmata, right? He's on the roof. Well, that can't be the same case, right? So, aim a sefer, say the sefer. Hu milmala v'hi milmata. If he's on the roof and she's on the bottom, the zar kula, and he threw it to her. What do you mean? If it's her roof, there shouldn't be any kind of megureshas. The chotzer is his. Once it leaves the market, the chotzer dida. So in the second case of the Mishnah, it's his chotzer, and it's his roof, and the chotzer is hers. So you have a split Mishnah. Reisha begag dida v'chotzer didei. You've structured the Mishnah that the Reisha is only talking about that the roof is hers and the chotzer is his, and the Seifa is begag didei. All of a sudden you've switched it to say that the roof belongs to him, chotzer dida. How can you have such a crazy mixed up Mishnah? Ella, the Gemara gives us a different teretz. Maybe Lav, we're talking about the chotzer and chanami is his, but the ushle makam, he lent another place for the wife through lending a place for her to receive the gift. So in the first case, it all belonged to him. But the first case where he throws the get up to the roof, he lent her the roof. And the second case is he lent her the chotzer. So then it all works. And now we understand where Rav Chizda, the chad makom mushli inshi, tre makomos lo mushli inshi. A person is only going to lend out one spot in his property, not two. So that's where Rav Chizda came up with this principle that regarding Gittin, Rishuyos Chalukik are considered one. Because regarding Gittin, regarding Gittin, it's considered two separate Rishuyos. It's considered two separate Rishuyos. He only lent one out. One he maintained for himself, and the other he lent out to the woman. So Omerle needed ear. What does one thing have to do with the other? Dilma haki the isa v'haki the isa. What's wrong with having the Reisha and the Seifa describing two separate cases? Reisha begag dida v'chotzer didei. Enachanami. The Reisha cases were it's her roof and the chutzner is his. And Seifa, Begag Didei, the chutzner Dido. Second case was his roof and her chutzner. Amar Rabbi. Shalosh Midas Begittin. There are three attributes of Gittin which make them different than Dinei Shabbos. Right? Here we say that a get is drawn down to the ground, kluta, even though the Chachamim argue. But that's how you mean in the Shabbos. Here we don't invoke kluta. It's all, is the chutzner mishtameres or not? Minter. And that the Amar Rav Chisda, imnoatz kone b'rshus hayachid, uberosho trusto. Person put a pole in rshus hayachid and put a basket on top of the pole. The zorak. And he threw something, he's standing in Rishus Harabim, and he throws it into the basket from Rishus Harabim, v'nachal gabo, and it came to rest in the basket. Afilu gavoa mea amachai. Even if this pole was 200 feet tall, you're chai. Now remember, Rishus Harabim, 10 tfachim above is called a makom p'tur. I throw something, if I carry something above 10 tvachim, it's considered a makom p'tur. I can carry something out of that. But here, since this pole is in Rishus Hayachid, and the Rishus Hayachid goes up to Shamayim, and there's a basket there, and it landed there, it's as if there is no limit to Rishus Hayachid, and I'm going to be chayiv achatas for transferring something from Rishus Harabim to Rishus Hayachid. Rishus Hayachid oila ad l'rakia. Hanimili le'inyan Shabbos. There's a concept of a reshus in its own. Aval hacha mishum intri v'alam inter. But if you throw it up there again, and it's a kind of basket where it wouldn't be watched very well, it would not be considered a separate reshus. We're just trying to show the distinctions between these dinim as it applied to Shabbos and how the chiyuv Shabbos and how it applies to acquiring again. Imagine you're living in Jerusalem, and there's many houses connected, and they're all level. And I have a roof, a neighbor has a roof, next neighbor has a roof, and he's gathering. I'm not allowed to stand on my roof, gather rainwater from his roof, bring it to me. You can transfer from a Rishus Hayachid to Rishus Hayachid. We said there's only chiyuv chatas on Shabbos if I go from Rishus Hayachid to Rishus Harabim, or vice versa, or if I transfer Daled Amos to Rishus Harabim. But if I go from one Rishus Hayachid to another Rishus Hayachid, I'm not chayiv. Chachamim made a gzeira that you need to make an eruv. For me to go, let's say there are 10 private homes that open up into a courtyard. And the courtyard is Rishus Hayachid, and all these houses are Rishus Hayachid. Somebody lives in an apartment, and all of there are Jews. I can't carry from my apartment to somebody else's apartment or into the shared structure unless we make an eruv chatzeros. We collect money from everyone there. We buy a loaf of bread. We put the loaf of bread in one of the apartments. We've now converted it that it's one apartment. And that's why if we carry something from our apartment to our friend's apartment, it's like we went into one apartment. Why did they make this statement? Because when you live in an apartment house complex with a lot of people, it looks too much like Rishus Harabim. So even though technically Nikar Adin, you're going from Rishus Hayachid, they made it gzeira. You're not allowed to do it unless you do some kind of hecker and make an eruv chatzeros to do that. So we just learned a principle. Just like where the people live in the houses, are separate reshuyos, and they made a special say that you have to make an eruv chatzeros. Even the roofs, we don't live in our roof, but even then it's considered separate, and you wouldn't be able to go from one roof to another roof unless you have that eruv chatzeros. But that's Hanimilin in Shabbos. Avalinian get bishum kapedu the kul hala covered in sheet means regarding get. If it fell onto a roof next to his roof, meaning I lent my wife that roof and throw the get it landed on the roof next to it. So even though Millennium Shabbos we treat it as separate, regarding get it's close. It's asking with hakpada. Does husband care? If he doesn't care, then it's still going to be a good get. Even though regarding Shabbos it's completely separate. Regarding get, it's not considered completely separate if it's close. On Rabbi. Shtei chatzeros zulifti misu. You have an internal courtyard and it's surrounded by an external courtyard. The inside, the pnimis was shalom, the chitzon was shalom, and the outside was his, and the inside was his. And then we have no problem. The outer chutzner had much larger walls than her chutzner, which had less walls. So think about a little courtyard inside. And out around it is a much bigger courtyard with much higher walls. Kivan shigia la'avir, the chitz uzrakala. Kivan shigia la'avir machitza sachitzona. Once it gets to the airspace of the outer courtyard, she's considered a divorced woman. That means it's got to be above the chutzner of her inner chutzner. Even though it didn't get, as long as it's in the airspace, it's enough. As long as it's reached the mechitzas achitzona, I raise the meguresh. It's my time. Panimis gufa b'mechitzas achitzona come into it. The inner walls are being watched by the outer walls. But masha'en came the kupos. This does not work by baskets. What do you mean baskets? Shtei kupos zubatos. One basket sitting in another basket. The baskets are not in a reshus that belong to either of them. The inner basket belongs to her, Pnima Shalom, and the outer basket, which the inner one is sitting in, the Chitzona Shalom. The Zarkullah, and he throws it into her basket. Afilu Higia, La'avra Pnimis, even if it's in the airspace of the inner, and it got burnt up or taken or whatever, Eina Muguresh, my time. There we want it actually to come to rest in the basket. We don't say that the outer walls of the basket sort of acquire it for him. And how does it work even if it came to rest? We described the cases, her basket is sitting in his basket. Well, that's like we said, if you acquire, that somebody goes into make company and buys something. From Jewish law, you haven't acquired it yet because you're in the reshus of the seller. So it should be the same here. The inner basket, most baskets had some kind of stand on which it stood at. Here, the inner one did not. So it was lower. And in fact, and the inner basket didn't even have a floor. And the inner basket's on the ground. And it's not in the kupa, it's just within the wall. Sort of with the wall of that basket, but it's really on the ground in itself. That's how Rashi learns. And once it reaches the get mekupa, she would be a mekudesh. Bishamei oim. Koiter odom ishto beget yosha. A get yoshon is somebody who wrote a get, and before he gave it to her, he had yichud with her. That's called a get yoshin. So Beishab is that get have halachic force? Beis Shammai Omrim Poiter Adam Ishto Beget Yashim. He can use it. It still can divorce her. Beis Hillel Oisrim. Beis Hillel says, think about it. He wrote a get because he wants to divorce, but he had yichud with her. We assume he's backed off from his intent to divorce her. So it weakens the koch of the get. Beis Hillel Oisrim. Is there get Yashon? What is this machlokas about? B'maika mifki. Beis Shammai Savri. Lo amrinu gzeira shemayon rugita koinem livnot. Could be that he's going to use this get a long time after he wrote it. Meanwhile, she might have children, but they're going to look at the date and they're going to say these children are a product after you were divorced and it came out smooth. Beis Shammai says we're not worried about that. Beis Hillel Savri, gzeira shemayon rugita koinem livnot. So we puzzle using such a get. But in Nisus, if the woman went ahead and got married using this get, lo seitse. We're going to see that there are many examples where if a woman got married to a second man based on a certain get puzzle, we will force them to be divorced. But in this case, to the second husband. In this case, listen, lechatchila, you should have done it. But if you did it, the marriage is okay. We don't force you to divorce. Lo seitze. However, ikedi amri, amr vaba amr Shmuel, in this garsha, that tinase lechatchila. So the first case was only a b'diavad that if you went to a rav for chuppah v'kiddushin, he wouldn't give it to you. But let's say somebody else married them, and they come to the Bezdin and they say, is that a problem? They said, they're not going to force a divorce. According to the Yikid Amri, you could even get married to Chazir. How do we paskin? Let's see what the Shulchan Aruch says. Get Yosha. By the way, that's why I use the old Steinsaltz Gemaras, because on the bottom of every page, you have the Shulchan Aruch and the Rambam, every halacha quoted. Now, I also have it, it's called Daf Achayim. It's an 8-volume set. They sold it at Lasio Mashas. There's every halacha, the Shulchan Aruch and the Rambam on every daf as you go through it. It's much more. The Steinsaltz doesn't bring every halacha, but if you want to see every halacha on every daf, it's an 8-volume set called Daf Achayim, and it just brings the Shulchan Aruch and the Rambam on every daf. It's very useful. So what's the halacha? I think it's valuable as much as possible to learn halacha l'maisa that we can as we go through the block. Misha kosav get l'garish esishto. He wrote again. And before there was actual physical divorce, before he gave it to her, he had yichud with her. In roitza l'garsha, if eventually he does want to divorce her, lo yigarshena ba'osa again. So we see right away, who do we don't paskin like the ikidiyam. We paskin like the first lashon in the Gemara. We don't say the chatchila, the Rav is going to marry them. We should write a new get. Din girsha beget zeh, areu migureshes. V'sinase bo l'chatchila. Oh, so it's not so fast. If there was a divorce, she's a divorced woman, and she can get married l'chatchila. Kalosh lachron k'divir Rabbanan. The Yeshiv that the Ramah says, that's only if the gave the get to the so he gave it to, he lives in China. Whatever, he gave it to a shaliach to give. And the shaliach hasn't reached the woman. And he has yichud with her. She shouldn't get married. Well, in this, a low say. But if she got married anyways, we don't force it to force. Okay. Now comes an important Mishnah, which the Maisa Bisman Hazeh is probably the most important Mishnah that the Dayanim in Beis Din that deals with Gittin, Kosav L'Shum Malchus, She'ena Hogenes, the date. So you got to write a date in the get. So you write a get according to the government. It's different. That is not ruling in the place that you are at. Misha Haya Babovel, Rashi says, because of Mishon Kach V'Kach L'Mleches Acheres. So normally, Eina Hogenes would mean like a bad government, like an evil government, Soviet Union, or maybe in the time of Chazal, Rome. That's not how Rashi explains. Rashi says more is going to ask, why is it called Eina Hogenes? Or the Shum Machos Modai. Machos Modai, right? With the Medes, or Machos Yava. The Medes and the Greeks don't exist. Or according to the date of Binyan Abayis or Churban Abayis. So if the government that you're living in is Makpur, the regular document should be written August 3rd, 2023, or whatever today's date is. So Chachamim have made a takana that you got to write that kind of date in again as well. And if you change what the takana of Chachamim is by Gittin, the get is possible. But not only possible, very severely possible. You see in the Hasav. Am I the Mizrach because of the Ma'ariv? You were in the West, and they wrote in the get that this is East. Or B'Ma'ariv because of the Mizrach. So what do I mean that this Mishnah is one of the most important Mishnahs l'chatchila today, this Manazeh? If you go and see the carefulness with how they write a get, what is the name of the city? Do you write Los Angeles? Or do you write Beverly Hills? Or do you write Downey? These are little suburbs of Los Angeles. And how do you write it? Or Haiba Mizrach because of the Ma'ariv, or the Ma'ariv because of the Mizrach. This invalidates the get. And listen to what? If the woman got divorced with such a get and married somebody else, Tate said mizeh mizeh. We force a divorce from the second, and even though l'chura, she was never really officially divorced from the first husband, right? Because we say the get is possible. So why don't we just say she's nation? No, we don't let you stay with your first husband. We knas her. We're giving her a fine. Technically, she's married to the first guy. This is a get possible. No, you cannot stay with this guy. You cannot stay with that guy. Gentlemen, what's going to happen? She's going to be careful to make sure that the get is written properly. Otherwise, she's ruining herself. She can't get the person she chooses to marry. This is going to force her to get divorced from that guy. And she's not going to be able to go back to her first husband. Worse. Utsricha get mizom. They each have to write a get. And normally, when you get married and you get divorced, there's a financial benefit that a woman accrues. She gets paid her ksuba. But in these cases, ein la lo ksuba from either. The lo peirus. So if she brought in fields called nichse maluk into the marriage, so the husband's allowed to eat peirus. Now, sometimes the husband pays back the peirus. She doesn't get those peirus. The law mazona, she has no claim on being paid upkeep. The law of laws, ksuba guarantees that she gets clothing. She doesn't get that. Lo al zev, lo al zeh, not from either husband. And im not lo mizeh mizeh, tachzri, if she already took these financial benefits, she has to return them. Here comes the real kicker. Ve'avlad mamzer mizeh u'mizeh. Look at what's going on here. This is a takonos chachamim. Make your idea and it gets a good get. But we get married, Harayat Mekudesh Asli Kedas Moshe Yisrael. They set the parameters. And if they say the get is invalid and she got married to a new guy, she was nation siege. and the son is a mamzer. Now, she goes back to the first husband. The get was possible. She still should be an Eishes Ish to the first husband. But what did the Mishnah say? No, we force him to give you a divorce. But if you didn't, and you stayed with that first husband, your child is a mamzer. Well, even though it's your full-fledged husband. Below Zev is there, mitanim law. If each one of these husbands are kohanim, they can't go to her funeral. Normally, a kohen can only go to the funeral of 7 relatives, the 6 primary relatives plus his wife. It's not considered a wife. Below Zev is as a kohen, lo b'mitziyosav v'lo ma'asiyadeh, lo b'fos l'dareh. A husband can take the earnings of his wife. And if she finds something in the street, it belongs to the husband. If his wife makes a neder, the husband can be made for the neder. Haisabas Yisrael, nis l'menakuuna. The zona, he says, Rashi. The sam zona, hainu eishes ish, shemezana tachas bayla lachirim. And that's the nafkamina. So it says in Parshas Emor, zona v'chalala lo yikacham. A kohen cannot marry a halachic zona. Here the word zona has nothing to do with prostitution. It has to do with a woman who did a ma'aseh biyah be'isra. The classic case is an Eishes Ish who was mezaneh. So she's a halachic zona. If there were Eidim, we would put her to death. Okay? But there's no Eidim. But she's a halachic zona, and she can't marry, let's say the husband dies or divorces her. She can't marry a Kohen because she's a halachic zona. So this woman is going to be halachic zona, because when she slept with her new husband, she's an Eishes Ish. The get really was not a good get. I'm going to stop in the middle of this Mishnah. It's unusual, but the blot stops in the middle of the Mishnah, and it's a long Mishnah, because you can see I want to go through these details carefully. Okay, so tomorrow we're going to learn the same time, 10 o'clock, because that way my guys will be able to listen at noon time, live.
Thank you.
Okay, Shavua Tov, everybody. Any comments? Any